John, before the break, we were talking about how energy prices get in everything. Does that mean we have persistent inflation that we'll have to address in the economy?
Well, yes, but again, energy is something like 7% of the cost of production, so it's not monster in terms of what it is when we go to the gas station and we see inflation there. But it gets embedded in everything. Wages get embedded in everything. We're seeing, and those wages and housing gets embedded in everything. For instance, one of the problems that the Federal Reserve has right now, and this is the way the BLS just figures inflation, is they kind of average, it's not quite dollar cost averaging, but they average in housing price increases. Okay, so if the cost of rent or the cost of housing goes up 10% in 1 month, it's going to actually show up over the next 3 to 6 months. It gets averaged out over time. So now, today, when we're roughly this time period, we're seeing the prices of housing topping. We're seeing the prices of rental topping. In the CPI that came out today, it was roughly 3% increase in housing, not because it happened this last month, because it didn't. It happened 4 or 5 months ago, and it's now filtering into the system. And they're going to have that persistent overhang from housing for another 3 or 4 months at least. And so it's going to be difficult for the Fed to get inflation below 6%, let alone 5%. And this is why I think we have to be prepared to take Jerome Powell at his word. He says he's going to make inflation number one. If inflation is his job one, then the market's thinking maybe interest rates get to 3.25%, 3.5%. No, interest rates get to 4%, 4.5%. A 5 handle on short-term interest rates is not out of the question, because how long is Powell going to continue fighting? Now, maybe he starts raising 25 bips rather than 75 bips. And then maybe it's every other meeting. But till they get inflation down under 3 and clearly on a path to 2, I don't know how he stops. I mean, he can stop, but he can't retreat.
What does a 5% interest rate do to our economy? What would the pain feel like from that?
Well, you're not old enough, but it would feel like 1981, 82.
Oh, that's when I graduated from college, right in that time frame. So I do remember it. It's not fun.
It was. I mean, I remember borrowing money from my bank at 18% and feeling lucky to get it, and using it to buy a little train car load of paper, whose the cost of paper was rising faster than 18%. So I could afford to buy it. It gave me a discount, and paper was short back then. We had paper shortages, and so I had paper. I could get the printing bid. That's the business I was in back in my late 20s and early 30s. You just have to do what you have to do.
What does that do to our federal budget deficit? Because I mean, we owe $30-point-something trillion. If you hit 5% interest and that rolls through, man, that's $1.5 trillion interest only.
It's going to shape a generation. That's why I keep saying we could be in for what I call the Great Reset. We're going to have to figure out how to allocate, because it won't be just $31 trillion that we're looking at sometime here in the next month or two. It's going to be $35 and $40 trillion in another 3 or 4 years. And by the end of this decade, $50 trillion, just taking the CBO numbers and projecting them out, and adding in a plus 2%, which is very conservative considering what they've done over the last 40 years. You put in a plus 2%, you figure in a recession, because they assume there's never going to be a recession, and all of a sudden you're at $50 trillion.